the region, here's the medial prefrontal cortex, ventromedial, and there's also a particular strip here in our cortex where the movements are generated, called the motor cortex. And then we looked for the wiring, so the connections, the highway from the emotion region to the motor region. So basically the highway from Germany to Canada. And we saw that in catatonic patients, this was completely blocked. Yeah? So this was significantly reduced. So you will see this indicated like this. So basically they had strong emotions and they could not generate any input anymore for the motor cortex to become activated. So logical consequence, no input in the motor cortex, no activity, no movement. This told me, wow, there really seems to be emotion is something you subjectively feel. Movement is something you can observe. Emotions are mental, movements are physical. So there you see a direct mind-brain, mind-body connection. So this is a phenomenon which is really at the crossroads between the two. So mind the gap, bridge the gap. So that's what I learned from that. But you want more. Of course, I'm also a psychiatrist, so especially after knowing what these people experience, you want to give them some therapy. And there were initial observations, case studies, that you can treat them with particular substances, benzodiazepine, one particular substance, specifically loracepam. Loracepam is a substance which acts at certain doors in our brain, and these doors are called GABA. And so we did a systematic study and could show that these patients react very well to lorazepam and no other benzodiazepines. Yeah? And so that suggested us maybe there's an abnormality in their doors, in the GABA-A receptors, which are called. So you see here, this is called the GABA-A receptors. It's basically one of the entrance door into the cells and neurons in the brain. So, and this is exactly then what we did. So then we tested, we looked for how the substance impacts the activity pattern in the emotion region. Remember the ventromedial prefrontal cortex here, how the lorazepam modulates it. So, and you can see very nicely, so these were post-acute catatonic patients. You can see on the right one where they did placebo. They were non-catatonic anymore. They have no activity. So that basically is a picture, even in the post-acute state, which resembles this lack of activity. But here you see in the lorazepam patient, it's completely normalized. So this could also be the healthy subject. So this really tells you this drug specifically acts in this region, normalizes the activity during emotional stimulation. Yeah? So here you have a treatment where you really know what's happening, and you can target directly. And when I see a catatonic patient, because I've seen so many, of course I have a feeling, okay, what might happen, what they subjectively experience, and particularly with the lorazepam, it's really a very good drug in the acute stage. So, as I said, then we looked maybe if they need much more GABA and GABA strengthening, they might have less doors. So meaning they might have less GABA-A receptors. And that's exactly what we showed here. You see, this is what every brain imager is very proud of, colorful slides. The more color, the better. Yeah, that's a professional pride. So you can see here in the middle, you see the red spots are those where these doors, the GABA-I receptors, are particularly abundant. You see the healthy subject is pretty red, and I'm sure it's as red in your brains now. Then we had psychiatric control patients, so these were schizophrenic patients in patients with depression without catatonia. So the only distinction was the presence or absence of a catatonic syndrome. And you see, they also showed quite well the doors. But you see there in the catatonic patients, you see the red circle. That's exactly the region from the emotion region, the medial prefrontal cortex. You see they show a decrease in their doors. So they have not enough GABA-A receptors. So that's why they need a strengthening of these doors. They need more doors. They need to strengthen those doors which are there. That's why loracepam is so effective. So back to my question, and indeed I came across this phenomenon as sort of really a cross point between mind and body. So what does it tell me? What did I learn from that? Here's the frustrating answer. The philosopher says nothing. Because this is just empirical work. And now I introduce you to the world of interdisciplinary context and terms and context. So he says, no, you are just showing some empirical data, and they have nothing to do with the question for mind and body. Because the question for mind and body is a metaphysical question. It concerns the basic existence and realities. So I was very frustrated. I thought I could say something about that. And then, of course, you ask the question, how can the philosopher ask this? So are mind and brain different categories? Are they like apple and oranges? So basically you confuse metaphysics and science. Are metaphysics and science completely different and have nothing to say to each other? Of course, being both, I doubt that. And I'm sure this person doubts that too. And you can imagine, when I saw this picture on the internet today, I really had to laugh. Yeah. So I really like this. Yeah. It's somehow scary, obviously. But, and it also, you might even say, is the brain really so gruesome that he has to look like this? Keep that in mind. So, coming back to my question, mind and body, are they related? Of course, the neuroscientists say. The brain is the mind is the brain, and there's nothing what you call mind. Philosopher, go home, forget it, become a neuroscientist, but don't dwell on your thinking. That's the answer many neuroscientists give today. The mind is just an illusion. An illusion. Some people say maybe it's a very tricky illusion which might have evolutionary advantages, but basically it doesn't exist. Mind, what we call mind, what the philosophers like to call mind, is nothing but brain. So this is basically the state of the art, the context with which I am myself working. So if that is true, then we should be nothing but our brain's gray matter. You know, the brain has gray and white matter, so we're basically just nothing but this matter thing. Yeah? So if that is so, then also when I wake up in the morning and I have the feeling that I am myself, it's wrong. I don't exist. Do you exist? I hope so. And that's the rest of my talk, that I show that you're very justified to wake up in the morning and say, it's me. It's myself. I know it's a very basic thing, and you say, why do I need such a German guy for that? But maybe at least think about it. So, is there no self but brain. So then, of course, I turned again to empirical methods. And at the time, I was in Boston. So that was the first time when I crossed the Atlantic. I was in Boston at Harvard University. And as I said, the brain imaging was basically just 5, 6 years old. And that was around 2000. And then there were some studies coming up about sort of where you had to distinguish your name from others' name and what happens in the brain. So basically what we call self versus non-self distinction. So that at the time came up, and that, of course, you can imagine being a philosopher, and suddenly you can investigate the self in relationship to the brain. Wow, that really grabbed my attention, and I said, that's something I have to do. And as trying to be a careful scientist, what you try to do is you map the field. You do sort of a state of the art. What is known, what is not known. This is very important. Of all the studies about where there were comparison between self and non-self, between my name and your name. So what happens in my brain when I see my name and when I see your name? And vice versa, I'm sure. So, and then it came out that in all these studies, you see here again, so this is the brain sliced half. I'm sure you don't want that let happen to your brain. Sliced half in the middle, and this is basically what you see. These are called subcortical regions. These are the cortical regions. And you see basically the medial surface. And all these colorful dots and spots were those regions which were found to be activated stronger when you heard your own name when compared to others' name, or when you performed your own movements versus other movements, or when you felt your own emotions versus when you felt emotions which had no connection at all to you, or others' emotions. So since these regions are on the median wall of the brain, we call them midline structures. Midline structures, cortical midline structures. And it turned out in the meantime that these regions are also very connected with similar medial regions in the subcortical regions. And this is based on anatomical wiring. So there are certain highways going in the brain, and these highways seem to be particularly strong here in the medial wall across the subcortical and cortical regions. So they seem to form a coherent network of highways. Yeah? See, as the Germans with Mercedes-Benz, I always think in terms of highways. So these regions seem to be central in distinguishing self and non-self. So one of the questions you might then ask is, what actually is the self? So you see, apparently these medial regions seem to be central, but now, of course, you want to know what is the self. So what actually happens in the brain when I wake up in the morning and I feel myself, oh, I'm still there, I'm happy. I didn't lose myself, which actually can happen. Yeah? You have, in schizophrenia, you have states where people do not feel themselves anymore. I encountered many Jesuses, and I encountered 2 Nofretetes in my life, and these people really feel that they are a different person, so they act and dress. So here what we did, so why is it so important for us to have a sense of self? Why? So what do we gain from that? I mean, just at the surface you say, oh, it doesn't matter whether I'm this or this person, I don't care. Oh, but there must be some benefits to it. One of the benefits maybe that it has a certain value or reward for you. It gives you a good feeling. Yeah? You see something to which you can connect very closely and you feel good. Yeah? It's very important. So when I see brains, of course being a neuroscientist, I feel somehow at home, it gives me a good feeling. When you see things which are very relevant for you, you feel good. So they have a certain value or a certain reward for you. And this is exactly, again, a thesis you can test. So if you say that self has a certain reward